The marble floor of the Sterling Grand Hotel gleamed under the crystal chandeliers like a frozen lake at dawn, and Marcus Cole pushed his mop across its surface with the slow, deliberate strokes of a man who had learned to make himself invisible. 3 years he had worked these halls. 3 years of pre-dawn shifts and afternoon departures, of nodding to guests who never saw him and coworkers who had stopped trying to understand him. They called him the ghost around here, not because he was quiet, but because he moved through spaces as though he had never existed at all. It was 7:15 on a Monday morning in Chicago, and the lobby was filling with the usual chaos of shift changes and early checkouts. Bellhops wheeled luggage carts toward the elevators. Front desk clerks typed with mechanical efficiency. Housekeepers gathered near the service corridor trading gossip about weekend plans and difficult guests. Marcus noticed all of it the way he noticed everything, with the automatic situational awareness of a man who had spent 16 years scanning horizons for threats that could kill in seconds. The sound reached him before he saw its source. High heels striking marble with the sharp percussive rhythm of a judge's gavel. He did not look up. He had learned long ago that the executive class preferred their service staff faceless, and he had made peace with that arrangement. It suited him. Anonymity was a kind of armor, and Marcus Cole had wrapped himself in it so completely that sometimes he forgot there had ever been another version of himself. Victoria Sterling stopped 6 feet away from him, and the lobby fell silent. She was 34 years old, the youngest CEO in the company's history, and she carried herself with the rigid precision of someone who had built her entire identity around never showing weakness. Black vest, tailored to perfection, 4-inch heels that added authority to her already considerable presence. Dark hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin of her temples. Her eyes were chips of obsidian cold and appraising, and when they fixed on Marcus, he felt the weight of judgment before she spoke a single word. 3 security guards flanked her. Rachel, her assistant, clutched a tablet to her chest like a shield. 50 employees had stopped whatever they were doing to watch, and Marcus understood immediately that this was theater. Whatever was about to happen, Victoria Sterling wanted an audience. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk, and Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach as the words registered, "You're fired. Get out. Immediately." He stood perfectly still, the mop handle balanced in his grip, and met her eyes without flinching. 41 years old, faded blue uniform stained with floor cleaner, and not a trace of fear on his weathered face. He had looked into the eyes of 40-foot waves and refused to blink. A hotel CEO in designer heels did not frighten him, but his daughter needed insulin tonight. His daughter needed him to keep this job for 12 more hours so he could pick up her prescription and make her favorite dinner and watch her fall asleep with that peaceful smile that made everything else bearable. His daughter was the only thing in the world that could make Marcus Cole feel afraid, and right now, standing in this marble lobby with 50 witnesses to his humiliation, fear wrapped around his heart like a fist. His voice came out steady, controlled barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, please. My daughter needs her insulin tonight. Can I at least get my last paycheck before I go?" Something flickered across Victoria's face. A microsecond of hesitation, a shadow of something that might have been human. Then it vanished, replaced by the same glacial composure she wore like armor. Human resources would mail his final check. He was to surrender his badge and leave the premises immediately. Security would escort him out. Marcus unclipped the laminated card from his uniform and handed it to Raymond, his supervisor, who had appeared beside him with the expression of a man watching a car crash in slow motion. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Raymond looked away first, shame burning in his weathered features. The walk to the service exit felt endless. 50 pairs of eyes tracked his progress. Some felt guilty. Most stayed silent. Victoria's voice rang out behind him sharp and clear, a reminder to all staff that protocol existed for a reason and deviation would not be tolerated. Marcus pushed through the door and stepped into the cold Chicago morning. Wind cut through his thin uniform like knives. The sun was bright and indifferent, and he stood there alone, unemployed, unable to afford his daughter's medication, feeling the weight of failure settle onto his shoulders like a physical burden. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Delgado, the 68-year-old neighbor who helped watch Lily before school. Lily's asking if you can bring ice cream tonight. She says her stomach feels funny, but she's being brave. Marcus's hands began to shake. He had failed her. After everything he had given up, everything he had sacrificed, he had failed the only person who mattered. Then the windows behind him rattled. The sound of rotor blades thundered through the morning air, and Marcus turned to see a Coast Guard MH-65 Dolphin helicopter descending into the parking lot. Debris scattered in every direction. Employees inside the lobby pressed against the glass mouths open in disbelief. A woman emerged from the aircraft. Silver hair pulled back tight. Captain's eagles gleaming on her shoulders. She walked toward the hotel entrance with the purposeful stride of someone who had spent decades commanding respect, and when she raised the megaphone to her lips, her voice carried across the parking lot like a declaration of war. They were here for Chief Petty Officer Stormbreaker. They knew he was inside. Victoria Sterling's face went white. Marcus stopped walking, and 50 employees who had just watched a janitor get fired in disgrace began to understand that nothing about this morning was what it appeared to be. The memories came unbidden, as they always did when Marcus let his guard down. 5 years of careful compartmentalization, and still the past found ways to breach his defenses. He stood frozen in the parking lot rotor wash, whipping his uniform, and for a moment he was not in Chicago at all. He was back in Alaska, back in the water, back in the worst night of his life. January 2019. The Bering Sea. A Category 3 winter storm with 40-foot waves and 60-knot winds. The fishing vessel Northern Spirit had capsized 2 hours earlier, and 12 men were in the water, their survival time measured in minutes rather than hours. Marcus had been 36 years old then, at the peak of his physical abilities, wearing the orange rescue suit that had become his second skin over 16 years of service. He stood at the open door of the helicopter wind, screaming past his helmet, watching the chaos below. Whitecaps everywhere. Debris from the destroyed vessel scattered across acres of churning ocean. And somewhere in that maelstrom, 12 fishermen fighting to stay alive. David Park had been beside him. 34 years old, 8 years as partners, the closest thing Marcus had to a brother. They had pulled hundreds of people from the water together, had developed the kind of wordless communication that only came from absolute trust. David's voice had crackled through the helmet radio, barely audible over the storm. Ready, Stormbreaker. Marcus had checked his equipment one final time. Mask sealed, fins secure. Rescue harness ready for deployment, always ready. They had jumped together, and the cold had hit Marcus like a physical assault. 40-degree water felt like being stabbed by 1,000 needles simultaneously. His breath caught. His muscles seized. But his training held, and within seconds, he was stroking toward the nearest cluster of survivors. 11 times he dove into those waves. 11 times he fought the current, the cold, the exhaustion to reach a drowning man and clip him to the rescue harness. The helicopter crew pulled them up one by one, and each time Marcus went back for another. The 12th man was different. He had drifted farther from the group, tangled in debris from the vessel, barely conscious. David had gone after him, while Marcus secured the 11th survivor. The wave came out of nowhere. A rogue swell that towered over the others, a wall of black water that seemed to materialize from the storm itself. It caught David mid-stroke and slammed him against a floating section of hull with enough force to crack his helmet. Marcus had seen it happen, had screamed his partner's name into the radio, had abandoned the rescue line and swum faster than he had ever swum in his life, muscles burning lungs, screaming terror, giving him strength he did not know he possessed. He reached David as the second wave hit, grabbed him with one arm while clipping the 12th fisherman with the other. The harness took all 3 of them, and the helicopter winched them toward safety. David was unconscious when they cleared the water. Blood poured from a gash in his temple, staining the orange rescue suit crimson. Marcus held him as the crew chief worked frantically, shouting orders that Marcus could barely hear over the roar of his own heartbeat. David's eyes had opened one final time, focused on Marcus with an intensity that cut through the chaos like a spotlight. His voice was barely a whisper, but Marcus heard every word. "Don't let this be for nothing. Promise me." Marcus had promised, had held his best friend's hand as the life drained out of him, had carried that promise like a stone in his chest for 5 years, a weight that never lightened no matter how far he ran. David Park died before the helicopter reached the deck. The official report called Operation Arctic Storm a success. 12 fishermen rescued from certain death. 1 Coast Guard casualty. Marcus received commendations, medal nominations, the respect of everyone who understood what he had accomplished that night. He refused the Silver Star, told the review board that the medal belonged to David. Then he went home to Chicago and tried to figure out how to keep living when the best part of himself had drowned in the Bering Sea. Sarah had been waiting for him. Sarah, with her sunshine smile and her endless patience, who had spent 16 years as a Coast Guard wife and never once complained about the danger or the absences. She held him that night while he sobbed like a child, and she promised him that they would get through this together. 3 months later, she collapsed in their kitchen while making his favorite dinner. Cerebral aneurysm. No warning signs. No chance for goodbyes. Marcus came home to find the ambulance in the driveway and his 5-year-old daughter crying in Mrs. Delgado's arms. The doctors said Sarah was gone before she hit the floor. They said there was nothing anyone could have done. Marcus did not believe them. He had spent his entire adult life saving people from impossible situations, and he had not been there when it mattered most. He had been at a follow-up appointment with a Coast Guard psychologist talking about his feelings while his wife died alone on their kitchen floor. The guilt was a living thing. It wrapped around his organs and squeezed. It whispered to him in the dark hours before dawn. It told him that he had traded Sarah's life for David's, that the universe demanded balance, and he had been too arrogant to see the price. Lily was the only thing that kept him breathing. 5 years old, already wise beyond her years, with her mother's smile and her father's stubborn determination. She needed him. She depended on him. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Cole chose his family over his duty. The conversation had happened 2 weeks after Sarah's funeral. Lily had been sitting on the couch, clutching the teddy bear her mother had given her, looking at Marcus with eyes that had aged decades in a matter of days. Her voice was small but steady. "Daddy, do you have to go save people again?" Marcus had knelt in front of her, taken her tiny hands in his. "What do you want me to do, baby girl?" The tears had come, then spilling down her cheeks in silent streams. "I want you to stay home. I'm scared, Daddy. I'm scared you'll go away, like Mommy did." Marcus had made his decision in that moment, not with his head which screamed about duty and honor and the lives he could save, with his heart which understood that this small person needed him more than anyone else in the world. His promise to her had been absolute. He would be home by 4 o'clock every day, no exceptions. He would never abandon her. He would never choose the ocean over her. He called Captain Hayes the next morning and requested separation, PTSD, and family hardship. The paperwork went through without resistance. Everyone understood. Stormbreaker died that day. Marcus Cole, Invisible Janitor, was born in his place. The Chicago apartment was small but meticulously organized. Military corners on the beds. Cleaning supplies arranged by frequency of use. A detailed spreadsheet on the refrigerator tracking Lily's blood sugar readings, medication schedules, and carbohydrate intake. Marcus woke at 4:45 every morning, 15 minutes before his alarm, because 16 years of Coast Guard discipline had rewired his internal clock beyond recovery. He lay in the darkness for exactly 3 minutes, running through his mental checklist. Lily's insulin pump had beeped twice during the night, normal adjustments, nothing concerning. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Another day of invisibility awaited. He moved through his morning routine with the efficiency of a man who had optimized every minute. Shower. Shave. The same faded blue uniform he wore every day, chosen because it rendered him forgettable. Coffee brewing while he checked Lily's overnight readings on the monitoring app. His daughter had type 1 diabetes, the severe kind that required constant vigilance. Insulin pumps. Emergency kits, hospital visits that came without warning, medications that cost more than his rent. The math was brutal and unchanging. $2,100 a month from his janitorial position, $1,800 in fixed expenses, rent, insulin supplies, utilities, food, $300 for everything else, no health insurance, no savings, no margin for error. Marcus had become an expert in the mathematics of survival. He knew exactly how many carbohydrates were in every food Lily ate. He could calculate insulin dosages faster than most nurses. He had learned to cook healthy meals on a budget that would make most nutritionists weep. And he had mastered the art of making his daughter feel normal, even when nothing about their situation was normal at all. The oatmeal was tricky. After 5 years of practice, Marcus had developed a reasonable competency in the kitchen, but oatmeal still defeated him with alarming regularity. Too thin, too thick. Burned to the bottom of the pot if he looked away for even a moment. He stirred the bubbling mixture and felt an unexpected smile tug at his lips. 5 years ago, he could jump from a helicopter into hurricane-force waves without hesitation. Now he was locked in mortal combat with a pot of breakfast cereal. David would have laughed until he cried. David had always found humor in the absurd, had been the one who kept Marcus grounded during the darkest missions. If he could see Stormbreaker, now armed with a wooden spoon and a determined expression, he would never let him hear the end of it. The thought brought a familiar ache, but it was softer now than it used to be. Grief never disappeared entirely. It just learned to share space with other emotions. Lily was still asleep when Marcus finished preparing her breakfast. He checked her blood sugar one more time, 98 stable, perfect, and then wrote his daily note on the small pad beside her bed. The words were always the same. I love you to the moon and back. Home at 4. Dad. He had written that note every morning for 5 years. It was their ritual, their promise, the thread that connected them across the hours of separation. Marcus locked the apartment door behind him and began the 3-kilometer walk to work. The bus cost money he could not spare. The Sterling Grand Hotel loomed against the Chicago skyline like a monument to wealth and privilege. 400 rooms, marble floors imported from Italy, crystal chandeliers that cost more than Marcus would earn in a decade. One night in the penthouse suite could pay his rent for 6 months. He had worked here for 3 years and had never once felt like he belonged. That was intentional. Belonging meant being seen, and being seen meant questions he could not answer. The staff entrance was around back away from the gleaming facade that greeted guests. Marcus swiped his badge and descended into the utilitarian corridors that the public never saw. Fluorescent lights instead of chandeliers. Concrete floors instead of marble. The real skeleton of the building hidden behind a beautiful mask. Raymond was already in the break room when Marcus arrived, nursing a cup of coffee with the resigned expression of a man who had long ago accepted his place in the world. 62-years-old supervisor of the janitorial staff, former Navy sailor from a generation when men did not talk about their feelings or their pasts. His gravelly voice cut through the early morning quiet. Early as always. You ever sleep in coal? Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar. Sleeping in is a luxury I can't afford. Raymond chuckled a low rumble that shook his substantial frame, spoken like a man who's had his ass kicked by life a few times. They had never discussed their histories in detail. That was not how men like them operated. But over 3 years of shared coffee breaks and quiet conversations, a kind of understanding had developed. Raymond knew that Marcus was not what he appeared to be. The way he moved, the way he assessed every room he entered, the way his eyes tracked potential threats without conscious thought. These were not the habits of a career janitor. Raymond had been in the Navy 30 years ago. Basic training, nothing special, a few years on a destroyer before returning to civilian life. But he recognized military bearing when he saw it. His voice dropped casual but pointed. That duffel bag in your locker, the one with the patches scratched off. Marcus's hand tightened around his coffee mug. Raymond continued, eyes fixed on the far wall. Coast Guard, Wright Special Operations from the look of it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unasked questions. Marcus finally spoke, his voice flat. That man doesn't exist anymore. Raymond nodded slowly, accepting the boundary. Fair enough. Just wanted you to know whoever you were before you're a good man now. That's all that matters to me. The moment passed and they returned to their coffee, but something had shifted between them. An acknowledgement. A tacit agreement that some things did not need to be spoken to be understood. This was how men like them built friendships. Not through emotional revelations or deep conversations, but through small moments of recognition. Shared silences that said more than words ever could. The lobby was already buzzing with activity when Marcus began his rounds. He moved through the space like a shadow, noting everything while being noticed by nothing. A guest near the concierge desk had left her purse unattended. Potential theft risk. Marcus adjusted his route to pass nearby his presence, deterring any opportunistic crime without anyone realizing he had done so. A water stain on the marble near the east entrance. Slip hazard. He marked it mentally for immediate attention, calculating the time required to address it without disrupting guest flow. A child running near the decorative fountain, parents distracted by their phones. Marcus positioned himself within intervention distance, ready to act if the situation escalated. These calculations happened automatically, the product of 16 years of training that could not be unlearned. He had spent his career assessing risks and neutralizing threats, and even in civilian life, the instincts remained. His cleaning method was another holdover from his former life. Standard hotel protocol called for chlorine-based solutions with a 15-minute contact time. Marcus used a water filtration system with UV activation that he had learned during Coast Guard disaster response training. 8 minutes better coverage, fewer chemicals, safer for guests with respiratory issues. Nobody had ever noticed the difference in results. Nobody had asked why his sections were consistently cleaner than everyone else's. That was the point of invisibility. You did the work, you got the job done, and you stayed beneath the radar of anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions. The morning passed in comfortable routine until the incident near the bar. Marcus was restocking his supply cart when he heard the sharp cry of alarm. A guest elderly man in an expensive suit had slipped on a wet patch near the bar entrance. He was falling arms, pinwheeling, headed for a collision with the marble floor that could easily result in a broken hip or worse. Marcus moved without thinking. His body crossed the intervening distance in a blur of motion, arriving just as the man began his descent. One hand caught the small of his back, the other stabilized his arm. The motion was fluid, controlled, executed with the precision of someone who had performed countless water rescues in conditions far more challenging than a hotel lobby. The elderly man found himself lowered gently to a standing position, completely unharmed, before he fully registered what had happened. His voice was breathless with surprise. "Good Lord, young man, how did you move so fast?" Marcus was already stepping back, returning to his invisible state. "Are you injured, sir? Any pain anywhere?" The man patted himself down, still processing the near disaster. No, I'm fine. Thanks to you." His eyes narrowed with sudden interest. "What's your name, son?" Marcus kept his voice neutral, forgettable. "Marcus, janitorial staff, sir." The old man studied him for a long moment, and Marcus saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. Not recognition of identity, but recognition of type. This man had seen military bearing before. He knew what it looked like. His voice softened. "You're not just a janitor, are you, Marcus?" Marcus did not answer. He simply nodded politely and returned to his cart, leaving the question hanging in the air like smoke from an extinguished fire. Raymond had watched the entire exchange from near the service elevator. When Marcus passed by a few minutes later, the older man fell into step beside him. His voice was quiet, meant only for Marcus's ears. "That was a rescue swimmer catch. Perfect form. I've seen it in training videos." Marcus said nothing. Raymond continued, "You know, in all my years supervising janitors, I've never seen anyone move like that. Never seen anyone who could assess a situation and respond that fast." Still nothing from Marcus. Raymond's voice dropped even lower. "Whatever you're running from Cole, it's your business. But someday, that past of yours is going to catch up. And when it does, I hope you're ready." Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "It already did. 5 years ago. I made my choice." Raymond nodded slowly, understanding more than Marcus had intended to reveal. They parted ways at the supply closet, and Marcus returned to his rounds with the unsettling feeling that his carefully constructed invisibility was developing cracks. Victoria Sterling's morning had begun with the particular kind of stress that came from fighting a war on multiple fronts. She stood in the elevator, watching the floor numbers climb, and felt the weight of her father's legacy pressing down on her shoulders. Richard Sterling had built this empire from nothing. One hotel in downtown Chicago purchased with borrowed money and renovated with his own hands. Then another. Then another. By the time Victoria was born, Sterling Hospitality was a dynasty worth $500 million. Her father had raised her in the trenches. Board meetings instead of birthday parties. Financial reports instead of bedtime stories. He had shaped her into his successor with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to everything else, never pausing to consider whether she wanted the crown he was preparing. Then, 6 months ago, he had collapsed in the very lobby she now walked through every day. Heart attack. Dead before the paramedics arrived. Victoria remembered kneeling beside him on the marble floor, gripping his hand while his life slipped away. His final words had been a command, not a comfort. Don't let them see you weak. Never. She had taken that command and built it into the foundation of her new identity. Cold, ruthless, untouchable. If the board members wanted to whisper about her age and inexperience, she would give them nothing else to criticize. If Preston Blackwood wanted to circle like a vulture waiting for her to stumble, she would show him a fortress without cracks. The board meeting that morning had been a master class in corporate warfare. 8 faces around a mahogany table, some supportive, most skeptical, all watching for signs of weakness. Preston Blackwood had led the attack with the smooth precision of a man who had been planning this moment for decades. 72-years-old silver hair swept back from a face that had aged into distinguished cruelty. He had been her father's COO once before. Richard discovered the financial irregularities and showed him the door. 20 years Preston had waited for this revenge. 20 years of rebuilding his fortune, acquiring sterling stock, climbing back into a position of power. And now, with Richard in the ground and Victoria in the CEO chair, he finally saw his opening. His voice during the meeting had been silk over steel. The quarterly numbers are concerning, Victoria. Your father never would have allowed such a decline. She had parried as best she could, but the damage was done. Preston had planted seeds of doubt in every mind around that table. A vote of confidence. 3 days from now. Her entire future hanging in the balance. Victoria needed a win. Something to demonstrate control, to prove that she was more than just Richard Sterling's daughter, playing dress-up in an office she had not earned. When Rachel mentioned the complaint about the janitorial staff member using unauthorized cleaning methods, Victoria saw an opportunity. Small, yes. Insignificant in the grand scheme of corporate warfare, but visible, controllable. A chance to show the staff that protocols mattered, that deviation had consequences, that Victoria Sterling was not someone to be challenged. She had not asked for details about the employee in question, had not inquired about his circumstances or his reasons. He was a symbol, nothing more, a lesson to be taught. The confrontation in the lobby had gone exactly as planned, public, decisive, a clear message to everyone watching, until it hadn't. Until the man in the faded blue uniform had looked at her with those gray steel eyes and asked about his daughter's insulin. Victoria had seen something in that moment. A depth of desperation that her carefully constructed worldview did not have room for. This was not a protocol violation. This was a father trying to provide for his sick child. For one fraction of a second she had hesitated, had felt the ice around her heart crack just slightly. Then she remembered Preston Blackwood watching from somewhere in the building. Remembered the vote of confidence in 3 days. Remembered her father's final words. "Don't let them see you weak." She had completed the firing with clinical efficiency and returned to her office feeling something she could not quite name. Not guilt, exactly. Victoria Sterling did not feel guilt, but something adjacent to it. Something that whispered she had just made a terrible mistake. Then the windows had started rattling. The helicopter changed everything. Victoria watched from her office window as the Coast Guard aircraft descended into her parking lot. Personnel in orange flight suits emerged, began setting up equipment with military precision. A captain with silver hair walked toward the hotel entrance, and beside her, still wearing his faded blue janitor's uniform, walked the man Victoria had just fired in front of 50 employees. Rachel's voice came from behind her, trembling. "Ma'am, I found his file, his real file." Victoria took the tablet with hands that had begun to shake. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Cole, enlisted 2003, Coast Guard Aviation Training Center. Distinguished graduate rescue swimmer school top of his class. 16 years of active service. Documented rescues 437. Lives saved 612. Coast Guard Medal. Distinguished Service Citation twice. Meritorious Service Medal. Air Medal 3 times. Operation Arctic Storm 2019. Lead rescue swimmer during maritime disaster response. Performed 12 water extractions in Category 3 storm conditions. Personally saved 11 lives. Partner killed in action during operation. Note CPO Cole refused Silver Star nomination. Stated the medal belonged to Lieutenant David Park. Victoria's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. Personal file spouse Sarah Cole. Deceased March 2019. Caused cerebral aneurysm. CPO Cole, single parent to daughter Lily, age 10. Voluntary separation. July 2019. Reason family hardship PTSD. Victoria looked up from the tablet. Through the glass walls of the conference room below, she could see Marcus standing at the center of a group of Coast Guard officers. He was pointing at something on a screen, explaining something with the confident authority of a man who had commanded life and death situations for nearly 2 decades. The officers were listening, taking notes, following his lead. This was not a janitor. This was a warrior, a hero, a man who had given everything for his country and then given everything again for his daughter. And she had fired him, had humiliated him in front of his coworkers, had stripped him of his dignity over a cleaning protocol that, according to the file Rachel was now showing her, was actually superior to the hotel's standard procedures. Victoria Sterling had spent 6 months building walls around her heart, had convinced herself that compassion was weakness, that ruthlessness was strength, that her father's way was the only path to survival. In this moment, watching Marcus Cole transform from invisible janitor to military commander, she felt those walls begin to crumble. Preston Blackwood appeared at her elbow, voice dripping with false concern. "Quite a spectacle, isn't it? The Coast Guard commandeering our facilities, the press gathering outside, all centered around a janitor you fired this morning." Victoria said nothing. Preston leaned closer. His whisper meant only for her, "Former janitor, I should say, who turns out to be some kind of decorated war hero." His smile was cold. "The optics aren't good, Victoria. Board members are asking questions. Questions about your judgment. questions about whether you're qualified to lead this company. Victoria felt the familiar walls rising the fortress her father had taught her to build. Preston straightened. The vote of confidence is in 3 days. I suggest you prepare for an unfavorable outcome. He walked away, satisfied, leaving her alone with the wreckage of her morning. Through the glass, Marcus looked up from the screens. His eyes found hers across the distance. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. The woman who had destroyed him. The man whose identity she had not bothered to learn before making her judgment. Victoria looked away first. In the conference room, Captain Catherine Hayes was explaining the situation to Marcus with the urgent efficiency of someone racing against a clock. The Pacific Majesty, a cruise liner with 847 passengers and 212 crew. The ship had struck submerged rocks 14 hours ago off Kodiak Island, Alaska, taking on water in the lower decks, listing 11 degrees and getting worse. 2 rescue attempts had already failed. The underwater terrain was a nightmare of submerged rock formations extending half a mile in every direction. Boats could not approach without risking hull damage. Helicopter extraction was too slow for this many passengers. 43 people evacuated in 6 hours. At that rate, they needed 4 more days. The ship did not have 4 days. Engineers estimated 18 hours before catastrophic hull breach. Marcus studied the satellite imagery with eyes that had analyzed 1,000 crisis situations. His mind was already working, already calculating approach vectors and tide schedules and current patterns. The sonar mapping was wrong. He could see it immediately. There was a channel through those rocks 40 feet wide, deep enough for rigid hull inflatable boats at high tide. The rock formations created an acoustic shadow that confused standard mapping equipment. He knew this because he had used that channel before. Operation Arctic Storm. 3 rescue boats threading through the needle while a Category 3 storm tried to kill them. Hayes listened to his assessment with the expression of someone who had just found water in a desert. Her voice was cautious, but hopeful. "You're certain about this channel?" Marcus's response was flat factual. "I wrote the after-action report. I mapped every inch of those waters during 8 years at Kodiak Station." Hayes pulled up another screen. A photograph of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. A boy of about 9 with his mother's smile. Dr. Sophia Reyes, 38 years old. Pediatric oncologist at Seattle Children's Hospital. Traveling with her son, Miguel. Her husband had died of cancer 18 months ago. This cruise was supposed to be their first vacation since the funeral. Hayes's voice softened. Miguel is on that ship right now, wondering if he's going to see his mother again. Marcus looked at the photograph. 9 years old. The same age Lily had been when Sarah died. The same fear in those young eyes. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Delgado. "Lily's asking about you. She says her tummy still feels weird, but she doesn't want to worry you." The conflict tore at him. 847 lives against one. Strangers against the daughter who needed him home by 4 o'clock. Marcus closed his eyes, saw Lily's face, heard her voice from 5 years ago, begging him to stay to not disappear like Mommy. Then he heard David Park's final words, "Don't let this be for nothing." His eyes opened. Decision made. His voice was rough. "I need to make a call." He stepped away from the table and dialed home. Mrs. Delgado answered immediately, and after a brief exchange, Lily's voice came through the speaker, bright and innocent, despite whatever was troubling her stomach. Her words cut through his defenses. "Daddy, Mrs. Delgado says you're on TV." Marcus's heart clenched. What? The news, Lily explained. They were talking about a ship sinking. Mrs. Delgado said that was what Daddy used to do. Then her voice changed, grew serious, more mature than any 10-year-old should sound. Her question was direct. Daddy, are you saving people again? Marcus pressed his palm against his forehead. Baby girl, I need to tell you something. Some people need help, important help, and they asked me to... He could not finish. The promise. Home by 4. Every day. No exceptions. Lily's response broke him. Daddy, if people need help, you should help them. That's what you always tell me. We help people who need it. Marcus's breath caught. Lily continued, her voice steady with a wisdom that seemed impossible for her age. It's okay, Daddy. Mrs. Delgado makes good mac and cheese. You can bring ice cream when you come back. A laugh escaped him. Broken. Half sob. The words came out before he could stop them. I love you, Lily. To the moon and back. Her response was immediate, the ritual they had shared for 5 years. I love you too, Daddy. To the moon and back again. Marcus ended the call, stood motionless for a long moment, collecting himself. When he returned to the table, his eyes had changed. The grief and doubt had been replaced by something harder, something focused. His terms were non-negotiable: 1 trip through the channel to show the rescue boats the path, then back to coordinate from the command center. And he needed access to emergency funds. $69. His daughter's insulin. Hayes did not hesitate. Done. Whatever you need, Chief. Whatever you need. Outside the conference room, Raymond had been watching through the glass. He had seen Marcus transform from the quiet janitor he knew into someone else entirely. Someone who commanded rooms full of military officers with nothing more than competence and presence. A young employee approached curiosity, overwhelming discretion. Mr. Raymond, what's happening? Why is the Coast Guard here? Raymond's response was quiet but certain. They came for Marcus. The employee's confusion was evident. Marcus, the janitor, Ms. Sterling just fired. Raymond turned to face the younger man, his expression grave. That janitor is probably the greatest hero any of us will ever meet. And Victoria Sterling just made the biggest mistake of her life. Marcus emerged from the conference room a few minutes later. He walked through the lobby with a different gait now, shoulders back, head high, the shuffle of invisibility replaced by the purposeful stride of a man on a mission. Raymond intercepted him near the service corridor. His voice was gruff with emotion. Marcus, whatever you need, whatever I can do. Marcus paused, looked at the older man who had been his only real friend for 3 years. His response was simple. Take care of things here. I'll be back when it's done. Raymond nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Marcus walked toward the parking lot, toward the waiting helicopter, toward a frozen ocean thousands of miles away, where 847 people were running out of time. Behind him, 50 employees watched through the lobby windows. The ghost they had ignored for 3 years was finally visible, and none of them would ever see him the same way again. Victoria Sterling stood at her office window watching the helicopter preparations. Rachel appeared beside her. Ma'am, the press is requesting a statement. They want to know why the Coast Guard is using our hotel as a command center. Victoria did not respond immediately. She was watching Marcus cross the parking lot, watching him climb into the helicopter, watching the aircraft lift off and disappear toward the horizon. She had made a terrible mistake. She knew that now. The question was whether she had the courage to admit it. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Don't let them see you weak. But there was another voice now, quieter, more uncertain, a voice that wondered if her father had been wrong about everything. Victoria Sterling turned away from the window. She had 3 days until the vote of confidence, 3 days to save her company, her legacy, her father's dream. But first, she had to figure out how to live with what she had done to Marcus Cole. The helicopter carried Marcus away from Chicago, away from his daughter, away from the invisible life he had built over 5 years. Below him, the city shrank until it was nothing but a gray smudge on the horizon. He thought about Lily, about the promise he had made, about the voice on the phone giving him permission to be Stormbreaker one more time. He thought about David Park, about the weight of that final promise, about 847 strangers who needed someone to find them a path through the impossible. He thought about Victoria Sterling, about the cold certainty in her eyes when she fired him, about the flicker of something human he had glimpsed before she buried it beneath ice. The helicopter banked west, heading for Alaska. Marcus closed his eyes and let the vibration of the rotors carry him toward whatever waited. Stormbreaker was returning to the water, and this time he would bring everyone home. The helicopter touched down at Coast Guard Air Station Kodiak 7 hours after leaving Chicago, and Marcus stepped onto the tarmac into a wall of frozen wind that hit him like a physical assault. Alaska in March, minus 15 degrees with the wind chill. The kind of cold that found every gap in your clothing and punished you for existing. 5 years since he had breathed this air. 5 years since he had stood on this ground where David Park's body had been loaded into a transport for the long journey home. 5 years since he had sworn never to return. The memories were everywhere. The smell of aviation fuel and salt water. The distant thunder of waves against the rocky coastline. The particular quality of light that came from a sun that barely cleared the horizon this time of year. Captain Hayes walked beside him toward the staging area, her boots crunching against the frozen ground. She had been watching him since they landed, assessing his state with the practiced eye of someone who had seen too many operators break under the weight of their own histories. Her voice cut through the wind. "You okay, Chief?" Marcus kept walking, his eyes fixed on the cluster of buildings ahead. "The last time I was here, I buried my best friend. The time before that, I pulled 11 fishermen out of 40-foot waves while the 12th drowned because I couldn't reach him fast enough." Hayes stopped walking. Marcus turned to face her, and his eyes were gray steel in the pale Arctic light. "So no, Captain. I'm not okay. But I don't need to be okay. I just need to be good enough." Hayes studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there, she did not argue with it. The staging area was controlled chaos. Rescue swimmers in orange suits checking equipment. Boat crews running through pre-mission protocols. Radio operators coordinating with the Pacific Majesty's Bridge. Everyone moving with the urgent efficiency of people who understood that time was measured in lives. Marcus walked through the crowd and felt ghosts everywhere. The faces had changed, but the energy was the same. That particular tension that came before every major operation when the outcome hung in the balance and nothing was certain except that someone was depending on you. A young man intercepted him near the equipment lockers. Couldn't have been more than 25, with the eager intensity of someone who had trained his whole life for moments like this one. His name tape read Brennan. The kid's voice was tight with barely contained excitement. "Chief Cole, they said you'd be running the channel with us." Marcus assessed him with a glance. Strong build. Good equipment discipline. eyes that held more intelligence than his youth suggested. His response was neutral. "That's right." Brennan pressed forward, the words tumbling out. "Sir, I studied your operations at Rescue Swimmer School. Operation Arctic Storm is legendary. What you did that night, the multiple extractions in those conditions, they still use it as the gold standard for cold water rescue." Marcus felt the weight of those words settle onto his shoulders. The gold standard. As if that night had been anything other than desperation and luck, and David dying in his arms. His voice was flat. "The gold standard got my partner killed." Brennan's face fell. Marcus softened slightly, recognizing himself in this eager young man. Focus on the mission. How many boats in the first wave? The professional question seemed to steady Brennan. His response was crisp. 3 rigid hull inflatables, 12-person capacity each. We're planning shuttle runs through the channel until everyone's off. Marcus shook his head. Shuttle runs won't work. The tide window is 47 minutes. After that, the channel closes and you're stuck outside the rock field until the next cycle. Brennan's brow furrowed. So what do we do? Marcus explained the convoy approach. All boats through together. Maximum passengers on the first run. Return before the window closed. Repeat every 12 hours until the ship was empty or went down. It was not standard protocol. Standard protocol assumed you had time. They did not have time. Hayes's voice cut through the staging area noise, calling all personnel to the briefing room. Marcus followed the crowd into a metal building that had been converted into a temporary command center. Maps covered every wall. Screens showed live satellite feeds of the Pacific Majesty, her white hull tilted against the gray Alaskan sea like a wounded animal. The ship looked worse than the satellite images had suggested, listing 14 degrees now with emergency lights flashing along her decks. Marcus could see passengers crowded at the railings, tiny figures against the massive hull, watching and waiting and praying for rescue. 847 people, parents and children, honeymooners and retirees, people who had boarded a cruise ship expecting adventure and found themselves facing the very real possibility of death. Hayes took position at the front of the room and began her briefing. The facts were brutal. The ship was taking on water faster than the pumps could handle. The captain estimated 18 hours until catastrophic failure, but that was optimistic. It could be sooner, could be much sooner. She gestured for Marcus to take over the tactical portion. He walked to the front of the room and felt every eye lock onto him. These were the best the Coast Guard had. Rescue swimmers who had trained for years to save lives in impossible conditions. Boat crews who could navigate through hurricane seas. Helicopter pilots who flew into storms that grounded commercial aircraft. They were looking at him for guidance, for leadership, for the expertise that had made Stormbreaker a legend in these communities. His voice filled the room with quiet authority. The channel is 40 feet wide at the narrowest point. Current runs 6 knots during the tide change. There's a dogleg turn at 60 meters, miss it by 10 feet, and you're on the rocks. He pointed at the satellite image. I'll pilot the lead boat. Follow my line exactly. No improvisation, no shortcuts. If I say stop, you stop. If I say turn, you turn. The margin for error is 0. A boat crew chief raised his hand. What about passenger loading? How do we prioritize? Marcus outlined the protocol. Medical emergencies first. They had reports of injured passengers from the initial impact. Then elderly and disabled. Then families with children. Able-bodied adults last. Crew stayed until every passenger was off. That was maritime law, and it was not negotiable. Someone asked about the weather. Winds were increasing, seas building. The forecast called for conditions to deteriorate over the next 24 hours. Marcus acknowledged the concern without minimizing it. We work with what we have. The weather doesn't care about our schedule, and neither does the ship. Every hour we wait is an hour closer to catastrophic failure. Hayes stepped forward. Questions. Silence. Then suit up. First wave launches in 90 minutes. The room emptied as personnel dispersed to their stations. Marcus stayed behind, studying the satellite feeds, running calculations in his head. The Pacific Majesty. A floating city reduced to a dying animal. And somewhere on those tilting decks, a 9-year-old boy named Miguel was waiting with his mother, wondering if help would ever arrive. Marcus thought about Lily, about the sound of her voice on the phone giving him permission to be a hero again, about the promise he had made to come home. He would keep that promise, but first he had 847 other promises to keep. The rescue suit felt like coming home. Marcus stood in the equipment room, pulling on the familiar orange neoprene, and his body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The weight of the material, the way it restricted movement just enough to remind you that you were protected. The smell of salt and rubber that had defined his existence for 16 years. Someone had found him a flight suit in his size. It fit perfectly, as if the 5 years of civilian life had never happened. As if Stormbreaker had simply been waiting dormant, ready to emerge when the world needed him again. He looked at himself in the mirror. Older. More gray in his hair. More lines around his eyes. But the man staring back at him was not Marcus Cole, invisible janitor. This was Chief Petty Officer Stormbreaker, one of the most decorated rescue swimmers in Coast Guard history. His phone buzzed. A photo from Mrs. Delgado. Lily grinning at the camera, giving a thumbs up a bowl of mac and cheese in front of her. The message beneath the photo was simple. She says save all the people, Daddy. All of them. Marcus stared at the image until his vision blurred. Then he put the phone away and walked out to meet his crew. Brennan was waiting by the boats along with 2 other rescue swimmers whose names Marcus had already memorized. Williams experienced Steady, the kind of operator who never panicked. Torres younger, hungry with something to prove. 3 rigid hull inflatables sat ready in the water. Engines idling. Equipment checked and double-checked. Behind them, 2 more boats carried additional rescue personnel. Hayes's voice crackled through the radio. Stormbreaker, this is command. You are cleared for departure. Tide window opens in 17 minutes. Good luck, Chief. Marcus keyed his response. Copy that command. Convoy departing. He pushed the throttle forward, and the boat surged across the dark water toward the distant shape of the Pacific Majesty. The ship grew larger as they approached. From sea level, she looked even worse than the satellite images had shown. Her starboard side rode dangerously low. Water poured from scupper holes like blood from a wound. The rock field appeared first as white foam. Waves crashing against formations that lurked just below the surface. The same kind of rocks that had torn the bottom out of the Pacific Majesty. The same kind that would shred a rescue boat in seconds. Marcus scanned the chaos, his trained eye picking out patterns invisible to others. Current directions, wave intervals, the subtle variations in foam that indicated depth changes. There. The gap, he remembered. A narrow channel through the apparent wall of destruction. His voice was calm over the radio. All boats stay on my 6. Don't deviate. The entrance is coming up on the port side. Brennan's voice came back uncertain. Chief, I don't see anything. It looks like solid rock. Marcus adjusted course, pointing the bow directly at what appeared to be the worst of the chaos. You're not supposed to see it. That's why nobody found it. He pushed the throttle forward. The boat hit the gap at 12 knots. Water sprayed over the bow. Rocks flashed past on both sides, close enough to reach out and touch. The current grabbed them, tried to push them sideways, but Marcus fought the wheel with arms that remembered this battle from 100 previous engagements. 60 meters ahead, the dogleg turn approached. The critical moment. The place where the channel made a sharp angle that would send any boat traveling in a straight line directly into a rock formation. His voice rang out, hard to port in 3-2-1 now. He spun the wheel. The boat pivoted on its axis. A massive rock outcropping shot past on the starboard side, missing them by inches. The hull groaned with the stress of the maneuver. Then they were through. Open water between them and the ship. Brennan's voice was shaky with relief. Holy God. Marcus did not let himself relax. Don't celebrate yet. We still have to get back out. Behind them, Boat 2 emerged from the channel. Then Boat 3. All three intact. All three with crews who now understood exactly why they needed Marcus Cole to lead this operation. The Pacific Majesty loomed ahead. Up close, the damage was catastrophic. Her hull groaned with the sound of stressed metal, a dying whale calling out in its final moments. Water poured from wounds they could not see. The list was worse than reported, perhaps 16 degrees now. Marcus brought his boat alongside a lowered gangway. Crew members on the ship had already started the loading process. The first passengers to board were stretcher cases. An elderly man with a broken hip face contorted in pain. A woman with severe lacerations from the initial impact, her clothing soaked with blood. A child with a head wound, unconscious, his mother following close behind with terror etched into every line of her face. Marcus directed traffic with the efficiency of long practice. Medical cases to the center of the boat, walking wounded along the sides. Brennan helping passengers down the gangway while Torres secured them in place. 12 passengers, 20, 31. The boat was at capacity. Then she climbed aboard. Dark hair, kind eyes. A face he recognized from the photograph Hayes had shown him hours ago in Chicago. Dr. Sophia Reyes. And behind her, clutching her hand with white-knuckled intensity, was Miguel, 9 years old. Brown eyes wide with fear. Looking at Marcus with the desperate hope of a child who had been promised rescue and was terrified it would not come. Sophia's voice was ragged with exhaustion and relief. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Marcus met her eyes, saw the same terror he had witnessed in hundreds of survivors over the years. The particular kind of fear that came from facing death and surviving, from watching your child almost die. His voice softened warmth, breaking through the professional shell. You're safe now. We're going to get you home. Miguel looked up at him, processing the orange suit, the confident bearing the way the other crew members deferred to this stranger. Are you the one who found the way through the rocks? Marcus almost smiled. That's right. Miguel's voice was small but steady. My mom said it was impossible. She said nobody could find a path. Marcus knelt to the boy's level, putting them eye to eye. Nothing's impossible when people are depending on you. Something shifted in Miguel's expression. The terror retreated, slightly replaced by something that looked like hope, like trust. Sophia watched the exchange with an intensity that surprised Marcus. She was studying him, this man in the rescue suit who spoke to her son with such gentle authority, trying to understand who he was and why he seemed different from the other rescuers. The clock hit 37 minutes. Time to go. Marcus stood and keyed his radio. Boat 2, take my position. I'm pulling out for return transit. He maneuvered away from the ship, and Boat 2 slid into place behind him. More passengers loading, more lives being saved. But 735 people still remained aboard a vessel that was slowly dying beneath them. The return through the channel was worse than the approach. The tide was shifting, current increasing, and the narrow passage that had been merely dangerous was becoming actively hostile. Marcus fought the wheel through every meter, his arms burning with the effort of holding course against forces that wanted to smash them against stone. The dogleg turn nearly caught them. A wave surge at exactly the wrong moment pushed the boat toward the rocks, and only reflexes honed by 1,000 similar moments saved them from disaster. When they emerged on the open ocean side, Brennan looked like he might be sick. His voice was unsteady. "Chief, that was close." Marcus's response was matter of fact. "It's going to get closer every run. The tide doesn't care about our schedule." They raced toward shore. Helicopters were already waiting to transport the most seriously injured to hospitals. The others would be processed at the staging area, given blankets and hot drinks, and the chance to call loved ones who had been watching the news with growing dread. As the first passengers disembarked, Marcus checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Mrs. Delgado. His heart stopped. He stepped away from the organized chaos and dialed. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was carefully controlled, but he could hear the strain beneath it. "Marcus, don't panic. She's okay now, but her blood sugar dropped to 42. I had to use the emergency glucagon." 42. Dangerously low. Glucagon meant she had been minutes from seizure, from coma, from death. His voice cracked. "Where is she?" Mrs. Delgado explained. She had taken Lily to the emergency room. They were monitoring her. She was stable now, asking for her father. Marcus pressed his hand against the boat's railing until the metal bit into his palm. "Tell her I'm coming. Tell her Daddy's coming." Mrs. Delgado's response was gentle but firm. "Marcus, you can't. Not yet. There are still people on that ship." The words hit him like a physical blow. She was right. Of course she was right. But his daughter was in a hospital bed asking where he was, and he was thousands of miles away, pulling strangers from a sinking ship. Mrs. Delgado continued, "She understands, Marcus. She told the doctor that her daddy was saving people from the ocean. She said you'd come when they were safe." Marcus's eyes burned. He blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. His voice was barely a whisper. "Tell her I love her. Tell her I'll be there as soon as I can." He ended the call and stood motionless, staring at the phone in his hand. 735 people still on the Pacific Majesty. His daughter in a hospital bed. 2 promises he could not keep simultaneously. Hayes approached from the staging area, her expression shifting from professional to concerned as she read his body language. "Chief, we need to brief for the next wave. The ship's list is increasing. Captain says they might not last until the next tide window." Marcus did not move. Hayes tried again, her voice softer. "Your daughter." His response was hollow. "Hospital. Blood sugar emergency." The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Hayes understood. Every operator who had ever worn the uniform understood. The impossible choice between duty and family, between the strangers who needed you and the people you loved. Her voice was careful. "Marcus, if you need to go." He cut her off. "And who runs the channel? Who shows your boats the path?" She had no answer. Marcus turned to face her, and his eyes were empty in a way that frightened her. You could figure it out, given enough time. But in 12 hours without training, you'd lose half your fleet on the rocks. The math was brutal and unchanging. If he left, people would die. Not 800 of them, maybe, but dozens. Scores. People who would survive if he stayed and drown if he didn't. His daughter needed him, but so did they. Marcus straightened his shoulders, pushed Lily from his mind, pushed fear from his mind, locked everything away in the same box where he kept David Park and Sarah and all the other ghosts he carried. His voice was steel. Brief me on the ship's current status. What's the engineering assessment? Hayes hesitated, then professional obligation overrode personal concern. She pulled up the latest reports on her tablet. The news was not good. Pumps running at full capacity, but losing the battle. List at 17 degrees and increasing. Another 3 degrees and the lifeboats on the high side would become unusable. Marcus processed the information and began calculating options. If the ship reached 20 degrees before the next tide window, they would need to launch lifeboats. The passengers couldn't navigate the channel, but they could survive long enough for rescue boats to reach them. If the ship went down before they could launch, then they would be pulling people from 40-degree water, and the survival time in water that cold was measured in minutes, not hours. Hayes watched his face as he worked through the scenarios. She had seen that expression before on other operators facing other impossible situations. The look of a man who was calculating the cost of every option and finding no good answers. Her voice was quiet. What do you need? Marcus's response was immediate. Faster turnaround. Cut the crew changeover time. I want boats ready to launch the second the tide window opens. Hayes started to argue about crew fatigue, about the need for rest between runs. Marcus cut her off. He would pilot the lead boat every run, rotate the crews around him. He didn't need rest. He needed to get those people off that ship before it killed them. Something in his voice told Hayes that argument would be pointless. She nodded and went to implement his orders. Marcus stood alone watching the helicopters transport the injured to safety. In the distance, the Pacific Majesty sat wounded on the horizon, still floating, still dying. His phone buzzed. Another photo from Mrs. Delgado, Lily in a hospital bed giving a thumbs up, IV in her arm, pale but smiling. The text beneath was simple. She says you're the best daddy in the world. She says save all the people so you can come home. Marcus stared at the photo until his vision blurred. Then he put the phone away and went to prepare for the next assault on the channel. The second wave launched at 0217. Darkness. Cold. Waves twice as high as the afternoon run. Marcus piloted the lead boat by memory and instinct. The channel was invisible in the dark, just black water and blacker rocks. He felt his way through reading current patterns and foam by touch, by the subtle changes in how the boat moved beneath him. 2 boats made it through clean. The third scraped bottom on the dogleg, turned not enough to sink, but enough to slow them down. They loaded 93 passengers this time. The ship was listing 19 degrees. Crew members had started rigging emergency ladders as the gangways became unusable. On the return trip, Marcus's boat took a wave over the bow. Freezing water soaked everyone aboard. A passenger went hypothermic, and they had to wrap her in emergency blankets and radio for helicopter evacuation. But they made it through. 642 people still on the ship. In Chicago, Victoria Sterling sat in her office at 3 a.m, unable to sleep. The television played footage from the rescue operation on repeat. Boats threading through impossible waters, helicopters lifting passengers from the tilting deck, a figure in an orange rescue suit directing traffic with calm authority. Marcus Cole, the janitor she had fired, the hero she had humiliated. The reports were calling him Stormbreaker, were digging up his service record, his medals, his history of impossible rescues. The story was spreading across every news network, and at the center of it was the man Victoria had destroyed over a cleaning protocol. Her phone buzzed. A text from Preston Blackwood. "Quite a show your janitor is putting on. Too bad it won't help you in the board meeting. 2 days." Victoria threw the phone across the room. She thought about Marcus, about his daughter in the hospital, about the way he had looked at her in the lobby with those gray steel eyes that seemed to see right through her. She thought about her father, about his final words, about the empire he had built and the lessons he had taught her. Don't let them see you weak. But sitting alone in her darkened office watching Marcus Cole save lives while his own child lay in a hospital bed, Victoria Sterling wondered if her father had been wrong about everything. Maybe strength wasn't about never showing weakness. Maybe it was about admitting when you were wrong. The third wave launched at 14:20. The ship was listing 21 degrees. 2 lifeboats had been deployed as a precaution, holding the most vulnerable passengers in protected positions away from the hull. Marcus brought 78 passengers to safety on this run. The ship groaned throughout the loading operation, deep metallic sounds that spoke of stress fractures and structural failure. The Pacific Majesty was dying, and everyone aboard knew it. On the return trip, Marcus's vision blurred for just a moment, just long enough for the current to catch them pushing toward the rocks. Brennan grabbed the wheel, correcting course before disaster struck. His voice was sharp with concern. "Chief, you need to rest." Marcus's response was automatic. "I'll rest when it's done." Brennan pressed, "You'll kill us all if you pass out at the helm." Marcus looked at the young rescue swimmer, saw concern, saw fear, saw the face of every man he had ever served with. His voice softened slightly. "Next wave. I'll sleep between waves." He didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily. Hospital bed, IV drip. Her voice asking where Daddy was. He checked his phone obsessively. Updates every 30 minutes. Blood sugar stable. Blood sugar rising. Blood sugar 110. She ate some crackers. 533 people still on the ship. The fourth wave was the worst yet. The ship was listing 23 degrees. 3 more lifeboats had been deployed. Weather deteriorating. Wind increasing. Seas building to heights that turned the channel into a gauntlet of churning white water. Marcus's boat was the only one to complete the transit. Boat 2 hit the dogleg rocks and had to abort. Boat 3 lost engine power from water contamination, limping through on a half power. He loaded 31 passengers, all he could fit, and made the return trip alone. Dawn came gray and cold. The fifth wave was delayed by worsening conditions. Hayes found Marcus in the briefing room staring at satellite feeds that showed the Pacific Majesty settling lower in the water with each passing hour. Her voice was urgent. "Chief, the ship's captain is reporting structural failure in the lower compartments. He's estimating 4 hours until catastrophic hull breach." Marcus's response was immediate. "What's our next tide window?" Hayes checked her tablet. 6 hours. The math didn't work. 4 hours until the ship failed. 6 hours until they could safely navigate the channel. Marcus stood his decision already made. Then we go now. No tide window. Full assault through the rocks. Hayes's face went pale. That's suicide. The channel will be... Marcus cut her off. I know what the channel will be. I also know that 500 people are about to die if we don't try. Hayes stared at him. You'd risk your crew on those odds. His response was steady, certain. I'd risk everything. He walked to the window, looked out at the gray Alaskan sea stretching to the horizon. When he spoke again, his voice was distant, lost in memory. When I was 23, I pulled a 16-year-old girl out of a capsized sailboat. Her parents drowned. She asked me why I didn't save them too. You know what I told her. Hayes waited. Marcus turned to face her. Nothing, because there was nothing to say. I saved who I could. I lost who I couldn't. That's the job. His voice hardened. 500 people are on that ship. Some of them are going to die today. Maybe a lot of them. Maybe some of my crew. Maybe me. But if we don't try, they all die. Every single one. He moved toward the door. I didn't come out of retirement to watch people drown. I came to save who I could. So either authorize the mission or get out of my way. Hayes was silent for a long moment. Then she keyed her radio. All rescue crews to emergency briefing. 10 minutes. They were going in. The emergency assault launched at 0647. 6 boats. Full crews. Every rescue swimmer available. Marcus stood at the helm of the lead boat, hands wrapped around the wheel so tight his knuckles went white. The channel would be brutal without the tide window. Cross-pattern currents. Waves breaking unpredictably over the rocks. Visibility near zero from spray and foam. Brennan stood beside him, face set with determination despite the fear in his eyes. His voice was quiet. Chief, I want you to know something. Marcus cut him off. Save it for after. Brennan pressed forward. No, I need to say it now. He gripped the railing. Whatever happens in there, it's been an honor serving with Stormbreaker. The real Stormbreaker, not just the legend. Marcus glanced at the young man who reminded him so much of David Park. Young, brave, ready to die for strangers. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. Don't make it weird, Brennan. We've got work to do. The radio crackled with Hayes' voice. Stormbreaker, all boats are in position. You have tactical command. Marcus keyed the mic and addressed every crew member in the convoy. His words carried across the water. This isn't going to be pretty. The channel is going to fight us every inch. Stay tight on my wake. If I go down, boat 2 takes lead. If 2 goes down, 3 takes lead. We do not stop until everyone is off that ship or we have nothing left to give. He paused, letting the words settle. 5 years ago, I watched my partner die in waters just like these. He gave his life saving a fisherman he'd never met. Before he died, he said something to me. Silence on the radio. He said, "Don't you dare let this be for nothing." So today we honor that. We don't let any of this be for nothing. Not the training, not the sacrifice, not the lives that brought us here. Marcus pushed the throttle forward. Let's bring them home. The channel entrance loomed ahead. Without the tide window, it looked like a wall of white chaos, waves exploding against rocks, current ripping sideways, no visible path through. Marcus aimed the bow directly at the mayhem. The boat hit the gap at 15 knots, faster than safe, faster than smart. But speed was their only weapon against the cross-current. Water crashed over the bow. The boat lurched sideways. Marcus fought the wheel with every ounce of strength he possessed, muscles screaming in protest. A rock formation flashed past on the port side close enough to scrape paint. The dogleg turn appeared through the spray. The critical moment. The place where boats died. Marcus spun the wheel with savage force. The boat pivoted. For one eternal second, they hung on the edge of disaster rock on one side, crushing wave on the other. Then they punched through into open water. Behind him, Boat 2 emerged from the chaos. Then 3. Then 4. Boat 5 didn't make it. The radio crackled with distress calls. They had hit the dogleg rocks, hull compromised, taking on water, crew abandoning to life rafts. Marcus's voice was calm despite the adrenaline screaming through his system. Boat 6 rescue 5's crew and return to staging. The rest of you on me. 4 boats continued toward the Pacific Majesty. The ship was dying. Her list had reached 26 degrees. Deck furniture slid toward the low side. Passengers clung to railings, to ropes, to each other. Emergency horns blared across the water. Marcus brought his boat alongside what remained of the loading area. The gangway was gone. Crew members had rigged rope ladders down the tilted hull. His voice carried across the chaos. Start loading. Injured first. Move, move, move. Passengers descended in terrified clusters. Some fell. Rescue swimmers caught them. Some froze on the ladders, paralyzed by fear. Brennan climbed up to guide them down one by one. Marcus counted heads. 12, 20, 31. At capacity. He maneuvered away from the ship, making room for Boat 2 to take his position. Then the Pacific Majesty groaned. A sound like a dying animal. Her hull split amidships. Water poured into compartments that had been holding. The captain's voice echoed across the deck. All passengers to the high side. Prepare to abandon ship. Marcus was mid-channel when he heard the call. He pushed the throttle to maximum. When he reached the ship, chaos had taken over. Passengers jumping into the water. Crew members throwing life rings. Lifeboats launching in desperate disorder. His voice rang out over the radio. All rescue boats, mass rescue operation. Pull everyone you can. Helicopters start water extraction. We've got maybe 20 minutes before hypothermia starts killing people. Marcus brought his boat into the debris field. Passengers floated everywhere. Orange life vests bobbing in the gray water. He pulled them aboard one by one. Brennan dove over the side to reach swimmers who had drifted too far. Then Marcus saw her, a child, maybe 7 years old, drifting away from the main group. No adult nearby. Blue lips, terrified eyes. He didn't hesitate. Jacket off, over the side, into 40-degree water that hit him like a physical assault, every nerve screaming, every muscle seizing. But his body remembered. 16 years of training. 437 rescues. His stroke cut through the waves like a blade. He reached the girl in 30 seconds. Small body shaking with cold. Eyes glazed with shock. His voice was gentle but firm. Hold on to my neck, sweetheart. Don't let go. She grabbed him with surprising strength, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck like a vice. Marcus swam back toward the boat, each stroke harder than the last. The cold draining him, the weight pulling him down. His arms burned, his lungs screamed. The distance that should have been nothing felt like miles. Brennan reached over the side, grabbed the girl, hauled her aboard. His voice was urgent. Chief, give me your hand. Marcus reached up. His fingers brushed the railing, slipped. The cold had stolen his grip strength. He went under. Everything was silent. Just dark water closing over him. Pressure in his lungs. Cold seeping into his bones like poison. He thought about Lily. Her smile. Her voice. To the moon and back again. Then hands grabbed him, Brennan and Torres hauling him out of the water like a net full of fish. He lay on the deck, coughing water, shaking uncontrollably. Someone wrapped him in emergency blankets. Someone else pressed heat packs against his core. Brennan's voice was raw with emotion. "Chief, you crazy son of a bitch! You almost died. You know that," Marcus forced words through chattering teeth. "The girl." Brennan's expression softened. "She's fine, warming up, crying for her mom, but alive." Marcus closed his eyes. "Good, that's good." Brennan's tone shifted to concern. "Chief, you need to get to the hospital. You've been in the field for 40 hours. You just went into 40-degree water. Your core temp is probably—" Marcus's eyes snapped open. "How many left?" Brennan hesitated. Marcus's voice was stronger now, demand cutting through the cold. "How many passengers still in the water?" Brennan checked with the coordination team. Maybe 60, 70. The helicopters are working them. Marcus sat up. The world spun. He grabbed the railing to steady himself. His words left no room for argument. "Then we're not done. We're not done until everyone is safe, or I'm dead. Help me up." Brennan stared at him, saw something in those gray eyes that couldn't be argued with, something that wouldn't stop until the mission was complete. He helped Marcus to his feet. The rescue operation continued for another 2 hours. Marcus stayed at the helm wrapped in blankets, shaking but functional. They pulled 37 more passengers from the water. The helicopters got another 22. When the final count came in, Marcus stood on the staging area dock and listened to the numbers that would define this day. 838 passengers rescued, 209 crew rescued, 9 passengers dead, 3 crew dead, 6 Coast Guard personnel injured. 847 passengers had boarded that ship, and 838 of them would go home to their families. Along with the crew, over 1,000 people would see their loved ones again. Hayes found him sitting on an overturned crate, staring at nothing. Her voice was soft. "Chief, the passenger manifest has been verified. Everyone is accounted for." Marcus didn't respond. Hayes continued, "You saved them, all of them. Well, almost all of them." Marcus finally spoke, his voice hollow. 12 people died. Hayes moved to stand beside him, and 850 lived because of you. Marcus looked at her. His eyes were empty, hollowed out by exhaustion and cold, and the weight of everything he had carried for the past 40 hours. His words were simple. "I need to see my daughter." Hayes nodded. "Helicopter's waiting. It'll take you straight to Chicago. Mrs. Delgado says Lily's been released from the hospital. She's home. She's stable." Marcus stood. His legs barely held him. He had been awake for more than 40 hours, had led a rescue operation through impossible conditions, had nearly drowned saving a child from freezing water. His body was running on nothing but willpower and the promise of seeing his daughter's face. Hayes stopped him as he turned to leave. "Chief." He paused. Her voice carried the weight of everything she felt, but couldn't fully express. "I'm recommending you for the Coast Guard Medal again. What you did today, the channel runs the water rescue, leading the operation on no sleep. It's going to be studied for years." Marcus's response was immediate. "I don't want a medal." Hayes almost smiled. "I know." Marcus started walking again. "Give it to Brennan. Give it to the boat crews. Give it to David Park's family." Hayes watched him go, understanding more than he realized about the kind of man he was. As Marcus crossed the staging area toward the waiting helicopter, he passed Dr. Sophia Reyes and Miguel. They sat on a bench wrapped in blankets, both of them alive. Sophia looked up as he approached. Their eyes met. Her voice cracked with emotion. You're the one who found the channel. The one who came back over and over. Marcus stopped walking. Sophia stood pulling Miguel up with her. Her son pressed against her side, still processing the trauma of the past 24 hours. Her words tumbled out, "My son is alive because of you. I'm alive because of you. How do I even begin to thank someone for that?" Marcus looked at her, then at Miguel, 9 years old, brown eyes, still scared, but alive. Alive. His voice was gentle. "You don't have to thank me." Sophia shook her head. "I want to. I need to." Marcus met her eyes fully for the first time. She was beautiful, even in her exhaustion, even with salt water still crusting in her dark hair. But it wasn't her beauty that struck him. It was the depth of feeling in her expression, the raw gratitude, and something else, something that felt like recognition. His words were careful, honest. "Go home, hug your son, make breakfast, watch him grow up, live the life you almost lost." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "That's not enough." Marcus's voice softened further. "It's everything. Trust me. It's everything." He walked away before she could respond. The helicopter was waiting. Chicago was waiting. Lily was waiting. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he filed away the image of Sophia Reyes looking at him with those dark eyes. The feeling of connection in that brief moment. The possibility that perhaps someday, when the world stopped spinning quite so fast, there might be something more to explore. The helicopter lifted off at 1847. Marcus watched Alaska disappear below, then closed his eyes. He slept for the first time in 40 hours. And somewhere over Montana, Stormbreaker finally allowed himself to rest. The flight to Chicago took 6 hours. Marcus woke somewhere over Montana disoriented, still wearing the salt-crusted rescue suit that had become his second skin over the past 2 days. His body ached in ways he had forgotten were possible. Muscles he hadn't used in 5 years screamed their protest. His core temperature had stabilized, but the memory of that freezing water lingered in his bones like a ghost that refused to leave. His phone showed 17 missed calls. Text messages he couldn't bring himself to read. A voicemail from Victoria Sterling that he ignored. Only one message mattered. "Mrs. Delgado 3 hours ago. Lily's asking when you'll be home. She says she has something important to show you." Marcus typed back with fingers that still trembled slightly from cold and exhaustion. "Landing in 2 hours. Tell her I'm coming." The helicopter touched down at Midway Airport at 2:30 in the morning Chicago time. A car was waiting, arranged by Hayes. Marcus gave the driver his address and watched the empty streets roll past the city, sleeping while he returned from a war most of its inhabitants would only see on the evening news. When the car pulled up to his apartment building, a single light glowed in the window. 3rd floor. His window. His daughter, waiting. Marcus climbed the stairs on legs that felt like lead. His body demanded rest, but his heart demanded something else entirely. Each step brought him closer to the only thing that had kept him going through 40 hours of impossible choices and freezing water and the weight of 800 lives pressing down on his shoulders. He opened the door. Lily was on the couch wrapped in a blanket, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. Mrs. Delgado dozed in the chair beside her, the television playing some late-night cartoon with the sound muted. The apartment smelled like the mac and cheese Lily loved, and underneath that the particular scent of home that Marcus had been dreaming about since Alaska. Lily looked up. Her eyes, so like her mother's, found his across the room. Her voice was small and huge at the same time. Daddy. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't find words big enough for what he felt. He crossed the room in 3 steps, dropped to his knees, and pulled his daughter into his arms. His voice broke on the words, "I'm here, baby girl. I'm here." Lily squeezed him so tight he could barely breathe, her thin arms wrapped around his neck with a strength that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old. "Daddy, you came back." Marcus held her closer, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Proof that she was alive, she was safe. She was here, I promised, didn't I? Lily pulled back just enough to look at his face, studying him with those eyes that saw everything. "I watched the news. They showed the ship sinking. They showed the helicopters. Mrs. Delgado said you were there. She said you were saving people." Marcus smoothed her hair back from her forehead, memorizing every detail of her face. "I was." Lily's expression grew serious, older than her years. "Did you save all of them?" Marcus closed his eyes, saw the 12 faces he couldn't save, heard the names he had memorized from the casualty list, felt the weight of every life lost, despite everything he had given. His voice was honest because she deserved honesty. "Almost all of them, baby. Almost all." Lily nodded slowly, processing this the way she processed everything, with a gravity that broke his heart and made him proud in equal measure. Her response carried wisdom no child should possess. "That's okay, Daddy. You tried. You tried really hard. That's what matters." Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes. "Where did you learn that?" Lily's smile was small but real. "You told me when I was little. You said heroes don't always save everyone, but they always try." Marcus had forgotten saying those words, had forgotten so many things from those dark days after Sarah died, when he was barely holding himself together, when every day was a battle just to keep breathing. But Lily remembered. His daughter remembered everything. Lily reached behind the couch cushion and pulled out a piece of paper. A drawing crayon on construction paper. It showed a boat on blue water, a figure in orange standing at the front, people climbing up from the waves. A big yellow sun shone in the corner, and in Lily's careful handwriting along the bottom, "My daddy the hero." Marcus stared at the drawing, the simple lines, the bright colors, the pure, uncomplicated love that radiated from every crayon stroke. Lily's voice was hopeful. "I made it while you were gone. Mrs. Delgado helped with the letters. Do you like it?" Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't find words big enough. He just pulled her close again and held on. His voice was rough with emotion. "I love it, baby. I love it so much." Lily snuggled against his chest, her breathing already slowing toward sleep. "I love you, Daddy. To the moon and back." Marcus pressed his lips to her hair, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the smell of home and safety and everything that mattered. To the moon and back again. They sat there on the floor, father and daughter wrapped around each other. Mrs. Delgado woke, briefly smiled at the scene, and quietly let herself out. The sun began to rise outside the window, painting Chicago in shades of gold and pink. Marcus felt Lily's breathing deepen into true sleep. He carried her to her bed, tucked the covers around her, stood in the doorway watching her rest. 10 years old, brave, beautiful, the only person in the world who could make him feel like he was enough. For the first time in 5 years, Marcus Cole didn't feel like a ghost. He felt like a father. He felt like a man who had finally found his way home. 3 days passed before Marcus felt ready to face the world beyond his apartment He spent those days doing nothing but being present, making breakfast for Lily, walking her to school, helping with homework, reading stories at bedtime, the simple rituals of fatherhood that he had almost lost forever in the freezing waters off Alaska. Lily's blood sugar stabilized. The emergency that had terrified him from thousands of miles away faded into memory. Another crisis survived, another reminder of how fragile everything was. On the fourth day, his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Victoria Sterling's voice was different from the cold authority he remembered. Softer, uncertain, human. Her words came carefully, as if she had rehearsed them many times. "Mr. Cole, this is Victoria Sterling. I know you probably don't want to talk to me. I wouldn't blame you if you hung up right now." Marcus said nothing. Let the silence stretch. Victoria continued, her voice cracking slightly. "But there are things I need to say. Things I've been trying to figure out how to say since the moment that helicopter landed in my parking lot." Marcus watched Lily through the kitchen doorway. She was coloring at the table tongue, poking out in concentration, completely absorbed in her artwork. His response was neutral. "I'm listening." Victoria exhaled relief, and nervousness mingled in the sound. "I fired a hero. I humiliated a man who spent 16 years saving lives. I made a terrible mistake, and I've been trying to live with that ever since." Marcus remained silent. Victoria pressed on. "I want to make it right. I have an offer for you. A real one. Something that might help you and Lily." Marcus's voice was flat. "I'm not interested in charity." Victoria's response was immediate. "It's not charity. It's recognition. It's what you deserve." She paused. "And maybe, if you're willing, it's a second chance. For both of us." Marcus thought about it. The hotel where he had been invisible for 3 years. The lobby where his dignity had been stripped in front of 50 witnesses. The woman who had destroyed him without bothering to learn who he was. But he also thought about what Lily had said that morning when he told her about the phone call, about how everyone deserved a second chance, about how that was what he always taught her. His voice was measured. "I'll think about it." Victoria's relief was audible. "That's all I ask." Marcus ended the call and sat for a long moment staring at nothing. Lily's voice drifted in from the kitchen. "Was that the lady from the hotel? The one who fired you?" Marcus walked to the doorway. "How did you know about that?" Lily didn't look up from her coloring. "Mrs. Delgado told me. She said the lady was really mean to you." Marcus sat down across from his daughter. "People can change, baby. Sometimes people do things because they're scared or because they don't understand. That doesn't mean they can't learn to be better." Lily finally looked up, her eyes searching his face. "Do you think she learned?" Marcus considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything Lily asked. "I don't know yet, but I think maybe she's trying." Lily nodded, returning to her coloring. "Then you should give her a chance. That's what you always tell me. Everyone deserves a chance to be better." Marcus smiled despite himself, his 10-year-old daughter teaching him about forgiveness. 2 days later, Marcus walked back into the Sterling Grand Hotel. He wore the only nice clothes he owned: clean jeans, white button-down shirt, the blue tie with tiny anchors that Sarah had given him on their last anniversary, the one Lily had insisted he wear. The lobby felt different now, smaller somehow, less intimidating. Marcus remembered pushing his mop across these marble floors, invisible, forgotten, a ghost, moving through a world that refused to see him. Today, everyone saw him. Staff members stopped what they were doing, whispered, pointed. The front desk clerk, who had passed him 1,000 times without acknowledgement, actually stood and nodded with something like respect. Raymond intercepted him near the elevators, grabbing his hand and pumping it with enough enthusiasm to rattle Marcus's teeth. The older man's voice was thick with emotion. "Marcus, my God, Marcus, we watched the news, all of us." The whole staff gathered in the break room. Someone brought in a TV from storage. "We saw the boats going through those rocks. We saw the ship breaking apart. We saw you." Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks. "Just doing my job." Raymond's laugh was a booming sound that echoed off the marble. "Your job, you saved 800 people. You jumped into freezing water to rescue a little girl. You piloted a boat through rocks that should have killed you." He shook his head slowly. "That's not a job, Marcus. That's something else entirely." Marcus didn't know how to respond. 5 years of invisibility had not prepared him for being seen. Raymond's voice dropped, meant only for the two of them. "You know, when you started here, I knew you weren't what you seemed. The way you moved, the way you watched everything. I spent 30 years in the Navy, nothing special. Just a deckhand, but I learned to recognize men who had seen real action." He paused, his weathered face softening. "I never pushed, never asked questions. Figured if you wanted to talk about it, you would. If you didn't, that was your business." Marcus met his eyes. "I appreciated that. More than you know." Raymond nodded. 3 years of coffee breaks. 3 years of watching you work harder than anyone else on the staff. 3 years of knowing you were hiding something and respecting your right to hide it. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, the weight of it solid and grounding. "What I'm trying to say is, I'm proud of you. Not because of Alaska, because of who you've been all along. A good man doing his best in a hard situation, taking care of his daughter, showing up every day. That's the real heroism, Marcus. The stuff nobody puts on the news." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. His response was quiet. "You were the only friend I had in this place, Raymond. The only one who saw me as a person." Raymond's eyes glistened. "That's what friends do. See each other, even when nobody else is looking." They stood in silence for a moment. Two men who had built a friendship on shared coffee and unspoken understanding. Raymond cleared his throat professional again. "Listen, whatever she offers you, up there you deserve more. You deserve everything. Don't let her lowball you." Marcus almost smiled. "I won't." Raymond squeezed his shoulder once more, then stepped back. "Good. Now get up there and show these executives what a real leader looks like." Marcus nodded and continued toward the elevators, carrying with him the knowledge that he had never been as invisible as he thought. Someone had always been watching. Someone had always cared. The ride to the executive floor took 30 seconds. Felt like 30 hours. Marcus watched the numbers climb and thought about the last time he had made this journey. Security escort, 50 witnesses, public humiliation. The doors opened and Victoria Sterling was waiting. Not in her office, right there in the hallway, as if she had been watching for him. She looked different. The fortress she had built was crumbling. The woman who had hidden behind boardroom tables and protocol manuals was nowhere to be seen. What remained was someone younger. Someone scared, someone human. Her voice was quiet. "Marcus, thank you for coming." He studied her face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion and regret. "You asked me to." Victoria nodded and gestured toward her office. "Can we talk inside?" The office was exactly what Marcus had expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago, expensive furniture, the trappings of power and wealth that meant nothing to a man who had spent his career saving lives in conditions that would kill most people. Victoria closed the door and turned to face him. Her words came slowly, as if each one cost her something. I practiced this speech 100 times, wrote it down, memorized it. And now that you're here, I can't remember a single word. Marcus's response was simple. Then don't give a speech, just talk. Victoria laughed a broken sound. That's not something I'm good at. Talking, connecting, seeing people as people instead of problems to solve. She walked to the window, staring out at the city her father had built his empire in. Her voice was distant. My father built this company from nothing. 1 hotel, then 5, then 20. He taught me that business was war, that weakness got you killed, that the only way to survive was to be harder than everyone else. She turned to face Marcus. When he died, I thought I had to become him. Cold, ruthless, untouchable. I thought that was strength. I thought that was leadership. Her eyes glistened. When I fired you, I wasn't seeing a man. I wasn't seeing a father. I wasn't seeing a hero who had spent 16 years saving lives. I was seeing a threat. Someone who challenged my authority. Someone who made me feel uncertain. Victoria's voice cracked. I destroyed a good man to protect my ego. And I've been trying to figure out how to live with that ever since. Marcus absorbed her words without responding, letting her say what she needed to say. Victoria walked to her desk and picked up a folder, extending it toward him. Her voice steadied with purpose. Director of Safety Operations, salary of $175,000 per year. Full benefits, medical coverage for Lily, the best specialists, the best medications, everything she needs, flexible hours. You leave by 4 every day, no exceptions. And a housing allowance so you can move somewhere with a yard, somewhere Lily can play. Marcus took the folder but didn't open it. His eyes stayed on Victoria's face. His question was direct. Why? Victoria met his gaze without flinching. Because this is recognition. This is what you should have been earning all along. She paused. And because I watched the news coverage. I saw what you did on that ship. The channel runs. The water rescue. The way you led those teams when everyone else was falling apart. You're the best crisis manager I've ever seen. And I want you working here for real this time. Not pushing a mop. Using your actual skills. Marcus considered her words. And if I say no, Victoria's response was immediate, then I'll accept it. I'll write you a recommendation letter that opens any door you want. I'll make sure Lily's medical needs are covered through a foundation grant. And I'll spend the rest of my career trying to be someone who doesn't need to apologize for how she treats people. Marcus was quiet for a long time. He thought about the apartment with the water stain on the ceiling, the pharmacy where he counted coins, the hospital bills stacked on the counter, the constant grinding fear of not being able to provide for his daughter. He thought about Sarah, what she would say, what she would want for Lily. And he thought about himself, the man he had been before tragedy, the man he had become after, the ghost who had spent 5 years hiding from his own reflection. His voice was steady. I have conditions. Victoria almost smiled. Name them. Marcus outlined his requirements. Home by 4 every day, no exceptions. Building his own team, hiring and training without board interference. And most importantly, a commitment to treating every employee with the dignity and respect that had been denied to him. Victoria listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes. I'm still learning, still trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be without my father's shadow." Marcus nodded. "Then keep learning, keep trying. That's all any of us can do." Victoria extended her hand. "Do we have a deal?" Marcus looked at her. This woman who had broken him. This woman who was trying to put herself back together. He took her hand. "We have a deal." The board meeting happened 2 days later. Victoria walked into the room with a confidence she hadn't felt in months. Preston Blackwood sat at the far end of the table, his silver hair gleaming under the conference room lights, his expression that of a predator certain of its kill. 8 faces watched her take her position, most of them loyal to the man who had been circling her empire since her father's funeral. Preston's voice was silk over steel. "Before we proceed with the vote, I'd like to remind the board of recent events. Our CEO publicly terminated an employee who subsequently proved to be a decorated military hero. The optics for the company have been—" He paused, savoring the moment. "Challenging." Victoria let him finish. Let him build his case with the careful precision of a man who had waited 20 years for this revenge. Then she stood. Her voice was clear and steady. "Mr. Blackwood is correct. I fired Marcus Cole because I was afraid. Afraid of being challenged. Afraid of being uncertain. Afraid of not being good enough to run the company my father built." The board members shifted in their seats. Victoria continued, "I was wrong. Not about following protocol, about how I treated a human being. About seeing people as problems instead of understanding their circumstances." She pulled up information on the conference room screen. "This is the contract I've signed with Marcus Cole, Director of Safety Operations. He'll be building new training programs, new crisis protocols, a new culture that values every employee regardless of their position." She turned to face Preston directly. "And this is an analysis I commissioned. The cleaning methods Marcus was using, the ones I fired him for, are 47% more effective than our standard protocols. They were developed by FEMA and the Coast Guard for disaster response. I fired a man for doing his job better than our manual specified." Murmurs rippled through the board. Victoria's voice hardened. "I made a mistake. I own that mistake. But I've also spent the past week working to correct it. Marcus Cole will be an asset to this company. His expertise in crisis management alone is worth more than this entire building." She looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. "I'm asking this board for 6 months. 6 months to implement the changes I've outlined. 6 months to prove that I can lead this company in a direction my father would be proud of." Preston's face had gone rigid with suppressed fury. His carefully constructed trap was falling apart. An elderly woman at the far end of the table spoke up. Margaret Chen, who had known Richard Sterling for 30 years, who had watched Victoria grow from a child into the woman standing before them. Her voice was measured. "I move to postpone the vote of confidence. 6 months. Let's see what she can do." The vote was swift. 6 in favor of postponement, 2 against. Preston Blackwood sat in silence as his 20-year plan crumbled around him. His face had gone the color of old paper, and for the first time since Victoria had known him, he looked every one of his 72 years. He stood slowly gathering his papers with hands that trembled slightly. Victoria watched him go, and when their eyes met at the door, she saw something she had never expected. Not hatred, not anger, just exhaustion. The weariness of a man who had spent 2 decades chasing revenge only to watch it slip through his fingers at the final moment. He paused at the threshold, his voice barely audible. Your father would be proud. Then he was gone. Victoria wasn't sure if he meant it as a compliment or a curse, perhaps both. She allowed herself one small moment of triumph, then turned back to the work that awaited. There would be time to process Preston's defeat later. Right now, she had a company to rebuild and a promise to keep. A promise to see people, really see them. It was the least she could do for the man who had taught her what strength actually meant. 1 week after the board meeting, Marcus sat in his new office on the 3rd floor of the Sterling Grand. The room was modest by executive standards, but it had a window overlooking the city and a door he could close when he needed to think. A knock interrupted his review of the new safety protocols. Brennan stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes. The young rescue swimmer had traded his orange suit for khakis and a button-down shirt that still had the creases from the package. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. You look like you're going to a job interview. Brennan sat down, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. That's kind of why I'm here, Chief. Captain Hayes said you wanted to see me. Marcus opened a drawer and pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. Brennan read the cover page, and his face went through a series of expressions that Marcus recognized from his own journey. Confusion, disbelief, hope. His voice was unsteady. Night security team leader. At this hotel, Marcus leaned back in his chair. I need someone I can trust. Someone who knows how to assess threats and respond to crisis situations. Someone who won't panic when things go sideways. Brennan looked up from the folder. But I'm Coast Guard. I don't know anything about hotel security. Marcus almost smiled. You know how to keep people safe. You know how to lead under pressure. You know how to make decisions when lives are on the line. He paused. The rest is just details. I'll teach you. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Chief, I don't know what to say. After Alaska, after everything, I thought I'd go back to Kodiak and just keep doing what I was doing. Marcus understood. The pull of the familiar. The comfort of not having to change. His response was simple. Sometimes the path forward isn't the one you planned. Sometimes it finds you. Brennan straightened in his chair, the nervous energy transforming into something more solid, more certain. His words carried the weight of a vow. I won't let you down, Chief. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. Marcus nodded. I know you won't. He stood and extended his hand. Brennan took it, and for a moment they were back on that boat in Alaska, pulling survivors from freezing water, trusting each other with their lives. Marcus's voice was gruff but warm. Welcome to the team, Brennan. Now get out of here and buy some better shirts. You look like you're about to give a book report. Brennan laughed, a surprise sound that echoed off the office walls. He was still grinning when he walked out the door. Marcus watched him go and thought about David Park, about the way one generation passed knowledge to the next, about the chain of mentorship that stretched back through decades of rescue swimmers, each one teaching the next, each one carrying forward the lessons learned in blood and salt water. Brennan would be a good leader. Marcus was certain of it. And maybe in teaching him, Marcus would finally understand what David had been trying to tell him in those final moments. Don't let this be for nothing. He never would. 2 weeks after the board meeting, Marcus received a letter at his new office. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a handwritten note and a photograph. The letter was from Sophia Reyes. Her words flowed across the page with the kind of honesty that came from having faced death and survived. I don't know where to begin. Thank you seems inadequate for what you've given us. Our lives, our future, everything. Marcus read slowly, savoring each word. Sophia wrote about Miguel, how the boy asked about Marcus every day, how he called Marcus the man who found the path, how he wanted to be a rescue swimmer when he grew up because of what he had witnessed on that sinking ship. She wrote about herself, about returning to work at the pediatric hospital, about how every child she saved now reminded her of the man who had saved her son. And at the bottom, in smaller handwriting, almost hesitant, we've moved to Chicago, closer to my family. If you ever have time, I would like to thank you in person. Miguel would love to see you again. No pressure, no expectations, just gratitude, and perhaps, if you're willing, the beginning of a friendship. A phone number was written beneath her signature. Marcus studied the photograph that had accompanied the letter. Miguel in his school uniform, grinning at the camera, a gap where his front tooth used to be. Healthy, happy, alive. He set the photo on his desk next to Lily's drawing of My Daddy the Hero. 2 children, 2 lives, 2 reasons to keep going. The coffee shop was small and quiet, tucked into a corner of Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood where tourists rarely ventured. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, a habit from his Coast Guard days when being late could mean someone dying. He ordered black coffee and sat in a corner booth feeling absurdly nervous for a man who had faced down 40-foot waves without flinching. Sophia walked in precisely on time. Dark hair loose around her shoulders, a blue sweater that brought out the warmth in her eyes. She looked different from the terrified woman he had pulled from the Pacific Majesty, rested, recovered, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with the life shining in her face. She spotted him and smiled, and something in Marcus's chest that had been frozen for 5 years began to thaw. Her voice was warm as she slid into the booth across from him. You look different without the orange rescue suit. Marcus felt an unexpected smile tug at his lips. You look different without the life vest and seawater. Sophia laughed a sound like music after years of silence. They talked, not about the rescue at first, about their lives, their children, the small details that made up existence. Sophia told him about her work at the hospital, the children she treated, the families she helped, the way her perspective had shifted after nearly losing everything on that ship. Marcus found himself talking more than he had in years about Lily, about the challenges of raising a child with diabetes, about the fear that lived in his chest every time her blood sugar dropped or spiked. Sophia listened with the attention of someone who understood medical crisis intimately. Her voice was gentle. It must be terrifying, knowing that at any moment something could go wrong. Marcus nodded. Every day, every hour. You learn to live with it, but you never stop being afraid. Sophia reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. The contact was electric, unexpected, a reminder that he was still capable of feeling things he had thought were buried forever. Her voice was soft. Miguel still talks about you. Every day. He wants to know when he can see the man who found the path again. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and saw something in her eyes that mirrored what he was feeling. Recognition, connection, the tentative hope of 2 people who had lost everything and were slowly learning to believe in the possibility of something new. His response was careful. I'd like that. Lily doesn't have many friends. Her diabetes makes her different. Other kids don't always understand. Sophia's expression softened. Miguel either. After losing his father, he withdrew, stopped connecting with other children his age. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Sophia spoke first. I'm not looking for anything, Marcus. I want you to know that. It's only been 18 months since my husband died. I'm still figuring out who I am without him. Marcus understood completely. 5 years for me, since my wife. Some days it feels like yesterday. Some days it feels like another lifetime. Sophia nodded. Maybe we don't need to figure it out right now. Maybe we just need... She searched for the right word. Friends. People who understand what it's like to lose everything and have to start over. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a pressure he hadn't realized he was carrying. His voice was honest. I'd like that, a friend who understands. Sophia smiled and it reached her eyes. Then that's what we'll be. For now. The unspoken possibility of for now hung in the air between them like a promise neither was ready to make, but both were beginning to believe in. 3 weeks later, Marcus took Lily to meet Miguel at a park near their apartment. The two children regarded each other with the wary curiosity of young animals meeting for the first time. Lily with her brown curls and serious eyes, Miguel with his gap-toothed grin and boundless energy. Marcus and Sophia sat on a bench nearby, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to let the children navigate their own introduction. Miguel broke the ice first, his voice carrying across the playground. Your dad is the one who saved me and my mom. Lily's response was matter of fact. I know. He's Stormbreaker. Miguel's eyes went wide. That's so cool. I want to be a rescue swimmer when I grow up. Like your dad. Lily considered this. My dad is teaching me to swim. Maybe he could teach you too. The two children looked at each other, some unspoken understanding passing between them. Then they were off, running toward the swings, their laughter echoing across the park. Sophia watched them go, her expression soft. They look good together. Marcus nodded. Lily doesn't laugh like that very often. The diabetes, the restrictions, the constant monitoring, it makes her feel different from other kids. Sophia's voice was understanding. Miguel, too. After his father died after the ship, he had nightmares for weeks. But lately, she smiled. Lately, he's been more like himself. They sat in comfortable silence watching their children play. Marcus spoke without looking at her. I'm not good at this. Talking. Connecting. I spent 5 years being invisible. Learning how to not be seen. Sophia's response was gentle. You're doing fine. Marcus finally turned to face her. I don't know what this is, what we're doing. I just know that for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm just surviving. I feel like I might actually be living. Sophia held his gaze. That's enough for now. We don't have to define it. We don't have to rush it. We can just... She gestured at the children at the park at the ordinary beauty of a spring afternoon. Be here, together, and see what happens. Marcus felt something shift inside him. The last of the walls he had built around his heart beginning to crumble. His voice was rough with emotion. I'd like that. April brought Lily's 11th birthday and a celebration that Marcus threw with more enthusiasm than he had felt about anything in years. The apartment was transformed. Balloons in every color. A cake that Marcus had ordered from the bakery Lily loved. 12 children from her class running through the rooms like a small sugar-fueled hurricane. Mrs. Delgado commanded the kitchen with the efficiency of a general directing troops. Raymond arrived with a telescope, the one Lily had mentioned wanting months ago, wrapped in paper covered with cartoon stars. Brennan showed up in civilian clothes carrying the largest stuffed dolphin Marcus had ever seen. The young rescue swimmer's explanation was simple, from the whole crew. They wanted Lily to know that Stormbreaker's daughter is part of the Coast Guard family. Lily hugged the stuffed animal like it was the most precious thing in the world. Sophia and Miguel came too. Miguel immediately found Lily, and the two of them disappeared into the crowd of children, their friendship already solid, despite knowing each other for only a few weeks. Sophia helped Marcus in the kitchen when Mrs. Delgado took a break. Their shoulders brushed as they worked. Their hands touched when passing plates. Small moments of contact that meant more than either was ready to acknowledge. At the end of the party, after the guests had gone, and the apartment was quiet, Marcus sat with Lily on the couch, cake remnants on the coffee table, wrapping paper scattered across the floor, the satisfying exhaustion of a day well spent. Lily leaned against his shoulder, the stuffed dolphin clutched in her arms. Her voice was sleepy, but happy. "This was the best birthday ever, Daddy." Marcus pressed a kiss to her hair. "Better than last year." Lily nodded. "Better than all of them, because you were here. Because Mrs. Delgado and Mr. Raymond and Brennan were here. Because Sophia and Miguel were here." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. Her question was quiet. "Daddy, do you think Mommy saw up in heaven? Do you think she saw what you did, saving all those people?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. He thought about Sarah, her laugh, her warmth, the way she used to look at him like he was the only person in the world. His voice was honest. "Yeah, baby, I think she saw." Lily's follow-up was gentle. "Do you think she's proud?" Marcus pulled his daughter closer. "I think she's always been proud. Of both of us." Lily smiled, satisfied with the answer, and closed her eyes. Marcus held her until her breathing deepened into sleep, then carried her to bed, tucked the covers around her, and stood in the doorway watching her rest. His daughter. His world. The reason he had kept fighting when everything in him wanted to give up. And maybe the beginning of something new with Sophia and Miguel. A family rebuilt from broken pieces. A second chance he had never expected to receive. Summer brought the Sterling Grand Hotel's annual gala, and with it a moment Marcus had never anticipated. He stood at the back of the ballroom, uncomfortable in the rented tuxedo that fit like a costume, watching Chicago's elite mingle and drink champagne that cost more than his old weekly salary. Lily sat at a front table with Mrs. Delgado wearing the purple dress she had picked out herself, looking like a princess in a fairy tale. Victoria Sterling took the stage, and the room fell silent. Her voice carried with new confidence. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This event is about celebrating our people. Not our profits, not our numbers. Our people, the ones who make this company what it is." She paused, scanning the room until she found Marcus. 6 months ago, I made a terrible mistake. I fired a man for doing his job too well. I humiliated him in front of his colleagues. I stripped his dignity because I was too scared to see him as a person. The room stirred. Whispers. Glances toward the back where Marcus stood. Victoria continued, "That man went on to save 850 lives. He led a rescue operation that will be studied for decades. He risked his own life to pull a child from freezing water. And when he came back, when he could have demanded anything, he only asked me for one thing." Her voice cracked slightly. He asked me to see people, really see them, not as problems or liabilities or protocol violations, as humans, with stories, with struggles, with reasons for why they do what they do. Victoria gestured toward Marcus. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in recognizing Marcus Cole, not as a hero, not as a legend, but as a father, a friend, a colleague, and the best person I've ever had the privilege of working with. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Applause that shook the chandeliers. Marcus stood frozen, every instinct telling him to disappear, to fade into the background, to become invisible again. Then Lily's voice cut through the noise, high and clear and proud. "That's my daddy. That's my daddy." She was standing on her chair, waving both arms, grinning like the sun. Marcus laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep inside that he had forgotten existed. He walked to the front of the room, took Lily's hand, and looked out at the crowd. Staff members he had worked alongside for years. Executives who had once ignored him. The woman who had fired him and then fought to make it right. His voice was steady. "I'm not good at speeches. I'm better at actions. Better at doing than talking." He looked down at Lily. "But someone taught me that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing it anyway. So here I am, scared, talking anyway." Quiet laughter rippled through the audience. Marcus continued, "I spent 5 years being invisible. I thought that was safety. I thought disappearing was the same as surviving. But it wasn't. It was just hiding. Hiding from my past. Hiding from my pain. Hiding from the person I was afraid to be." His voice strengthened. "It took a crisis to bring me back. 800 people on a sinking ship. A child in freezing water. My daughter in a hospital bed. All of it happening at once. All of it forcing me to remember who I was. Who I am." He looked at Victoria. "And it took someone willing to give me a second chance. Someone willing to admit she was wrong. Someone brave enough to grow." Marcus lifted Lily onto his hip and addressed the room. "What I want to leave you with tonight is this: see each other. Really see each other. The people around you, the ones you've ignored, the ones you've overlooked, the ones you think you know. They might be carrying stories that would break your heart and rebuild it in the same breath." His final words rang through the silent ballroom. Seeing each other. That's all any of us want. That's all any of us need. To be seen. The applause this time was different, quieter, deeper. The kind that came from understanding, not just appreciation. Afterward, Marcus stood on the hotel balcony, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Sophia found him there, 2 glasses of champagne in her hands. She offered him one. That was quite a speech. Marcus took the glass, but didn't drink. I meant every word. Sophia stood beside him at the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Her voice was soft. "I know you did. That's what made it powerful." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights glitter against the night sky. Sophia spoke first. "Miguel asked me something this morning. He wanted to know if you could teach him to swim, like you're teaching Lily." Marcus turned to look at her. "What did you tell him?" Sophia's smile was warm. "I told him I'd ask you." Marcus considered the question. Teaching Miguel would mean more time with Sophia, more opportunities for whatever was growing between them to develop, more risk, more possibility. His response surprised him with its certainty. "I'd like that, if you're okay with it." Sophia's hand found his on the railing. A brief touch. A promise. Her voice was quiet. I'm more than okay with it. They turned back to the skyline, standing together in a moment that felt like the beginning of something neither had expected to find. 1 month later, Marcus stood in the Sterling Grand's pool, waist deep in water, with Lily on one side and Miguel on the other. Sophia watched from a lounge chair nearby, a book open in her lap that she hadn't read a word of in the past hour. Marcus's voice was patient, encouraging. Remember what I taught you. Arms like this, legs like this. Don't fight the water. Work with it. Lily pushed off from the wall first, her strokes still awkward but improving every week. She reached Marcus and grabbed his arm, triumphant. Her voice was breathless with excitement. Did you see, Daddy? I made it all the way. Marcus's pride was evident. I saw, baby. You're getting stronger every day. Miguel went next, his competitive nature driving him to match Lily's distance. He reached Marcus and surfaced with a gap-toothed grin. His declaration was confident. I'm going to be a rescue swimmer, just like you, Mr. Cole. Marcus looked at the boy, saw the determination in his young eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. His response was serious. That's a big goal, Miguel. It takes years of training, discipline, courage. Miguel nodded solemnly. I know, but you did it. And if you can do it, maybe I can too. Marcus glanced at Sophia, who was watching the exchange with tears in her eyes. He turned back to Miguel. Tell you what, you keep practicing, keep working hard, and when you're old enough, I'll introduce you to some people who can help you get started. Miguel's face lit up like a sunrise. Later, after the children had dried off and gone to get ice cream with Mrs. Delgado Marcus, and Sophia sat by the pool in the fading afternoon light. Sophia broke the comfortable silence. You're good with him, with both of them. Marcus watched a leaf drift across the water's surface. Kids are honest. They don't pretend to be something they're not. It's refreshing. Sophia turned to face him. Marcus, I need to tell you something. He met her eyes waiting. Her voice was careful. These past few weeks with you, with Lily and Miguel together, it's been... She searched for the right word. Healing. In a way I didn't expect. Marcus nodded slowly. For me too. Sophia continued, I'm not ready for anything serious. Not yet. There's still grief I'm working through. Still pieces of myself I'm trying to put back together. Marcus understood completely. Same here. 5 years, and some days it still feels fresh. Sophia reached out and took his hand. But I don't want to lose this. Whatever this is. The friendship. The connection. The possibility. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. We don't have to figure it all out today. We can take it slow. See where it goes. Sophia smiled and it reached her eyes. I'd like that. They sat together, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over Chicago. Two people who had lost everything slowly learning to believe in the possibility of finding something new. The final scene happened on a quiet evening in late summer. Marcus stood at the window of his new apartment, the one with the yard Lily had always wanted, watching the Chicago skyline fade from gold to purple to black. Lily was asleep in her room, exhausted from a day of swimming lessons and playing with Miguel. Her blood sugar was stable. Her smile had been constant. She was happy in a way Marcus had almost forgotten was possible. His phone buzzed. A text from Hayes. New situation developing off the Mexican coast. Pentagon requesting consultation. No rush. Tomorrow morning is fine. Marcus typed back, I'll review at 6, before Lily wakes up. He put the phone aside and walked to the shelf where Sarah's photo stood. 5 years since he had held her. 5 years since her laugh had filled these rooms. 5 years since she had looked at him with those eyes that made him believe he could do anything. He picked up the photo, running his thumb across the glass. His voice was barely a whisper. "I think I'm going to be okay, Sarah. I think we're both going to be okay." The photo didn't answer. It never would. But Marcus could have sworn he felt something warm settle in his chest. A blessing. A permission. A gentle push forward. He set the photo back on the shelf and looked around the room. Lily's drawing hung on the wall. My daddy the hero. Sarah's photo on the shelf. Her smile still warm after all these years. A new photo beside it. Miguel and Lily at the park, laughing arms around each other like the siblings they were slowly becoming. Another photo. Raymond, Brennan, Sophia, Mrs. Delgado. The impromptu family Marcus had built from broken pieces. He thought about everything that had happened. The firing. The helicopter. The rescue. The second chance. He thought about Victoria Sterling still learning to lead with compassion instead of fear. He thought about Preston Blackwood, whose 20-year revenge had crumbled in a single board meeting. He thought about Brennan now leading the hotel's night security team, the next generation of protectors being trained. He thought about Sophia, the coffee shop, the park, the swimming lessons, the slow, careful dance of two wounded hearts learning to trust again. And he thought about himself, the man he had been, the ghost he had become, the person he was still becoming. Some heroes wore uniforms and carried medals. Some heroes saved the world in dramatic fashion with helicopters and rescue boats and freezing water. But the greatest heroes were the ones who showed up day after day for the people who needed them most. The ones who made breakfast and checked blood sugar and helped with homework. The ones who taught swimming lessons and attended birthday parties and sat by hospital beds. Marcus Cole was that kind of hero. And after 5 years of hiding, 5 years of invisibility, 5 years of thinking he had nothing left to give, he had finally found his way home. The apartment was quiet. The city slept. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. Marcus Cole stood at the window, no longer a ghost, no longer invisible, no longer running from the man he used to be. He was a father. He was a friend. He was perhaps on his way to being something more with Sophia. He was Stormbreaker, returned from the depths. And for the first time in 5 years, that was more than enough. It was everything.